You sat on the bed, your fingers absent-mindedly scrolling through your phone. The hours passed, and it seemed like every minute stretched longer than the last. You glanced at the clock on the wall. Another night, another late arrival. Jungkook had always been busy, and his late nights had become a part of your routine. You hated the silence that filled the space between you two when he wasn't around. It made your heart feel heavy, and you couldn't sleep without him. That was your secret, the waiting, the longing, because you felt incomplete without him beside you. Your fingers lazily scrolled through your phone, but nothing could truly capture your attention. You sighed, preparing to scroll through a new app for some distraction. But then you heard it, a soft click of the door. Your head snapped up, eyes locking onto him as he stepped inside. Your heart skipping a beat as you finally saw him. He paused in the doorway, his gaze locking onto yours. His lips parted, but no words came out at first. His eyes softened, guilt creeping in as he realized how late it was. You were sitting on his side of the bed, waiting for him. Like always, you stood up slowly, your movements stiff as you faced him. The distance between you felt heavier now, more noticeable. Yin, you're late again, Jungkook, you said, your voice tinged with a quiet frustration that you couldn't quite hide. His expression softened with guilt. He stepped toward you, his eyes searching yours. Jungkook, I'm sorry, Yin. I'll try to come home sooner next time. You nodded, your heart aching at his words. He always said that, but somehow, it never seemed to change. You tried to smile, but it came out weak. Yin, it's okay, you said, your voice a little more strained than you intended. The awkward tension hung in the air before you spoke again. Yin, have you eaten? You asked, your concern for him still lingering despite everything. He gave you a quick nod. Jungkook, yeah, I did. And you? He asked softly, but you just hummed in response. Yin, okay then, let's sleep, you said, your voice low, inviting him to close the distance between you. You made your way toward the wardrobe, your fingers brushing over his clothes. You picked out his favorite comfortable set, something simple for him to wear around the house. Jungkook, Yin, wait. You paused, turning back toward him. He was standing there, looking at you, but not moving toward you. There was a hesitation in his eyes, something you couldn't quite place. Jungkook's words came out slowly, almost like a confession. Jungkook, actually, I'm sorry, but I still have some work left. I have to go to my study room. Your brow furrowed in confusion, not expecting him to say that. Yin, but you're already late, Jungkook. When are you going to sleep? He shifted hesitatingly, avoiding your gaze for a moment before speaking again, his voice softer this time. Just for today. I have an important meeting tomorrow. I need to finish up some things. You stood there, staring at him, a twinge of disappointment settling in your chest. You nodded, trying to suppress the frustration that bubbled inside. Slowly, you put his clothes back into the wardrobe, the action feeling heavier than it should have. Yin, it's okay, you said, the words tasting bitter on your tongue. How much time will it take? Jungkook's face softened as he saw the quiet acceptance in your eyes. Jungkook, I'm not sure, he replied gently. Please go to sleep, Yin. It's already past 10. I'll join you soon. I promise. You nodded, a weak smile pulling at your lips. Yin, okay. He turned toward the door, but before he left, he made sure you were tucked into bed. The covers were warm, and with a final glance, he left the room, closing the door softly behind him. Jungkook sat at his desk, the soft glow of the desk lamp casting shadows over his workspace. Papers were scattered across the surface, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in thoughts of you. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, but he couldn't focus. Every few seconds, his gaze would drift to the clock, silently counting the minutes until he could leave the room and return to you. Imagine the quiet, peaceful scene of you in bed, already asleep, your face soft and relaxed. The image of you, calm and innocent as you drifted into sleep, made him blush. It was always the same. He waited for you to fall asleep so he could stare at you and fall asleep too. And every night, without fail, he would sneak one last glance at your face, a sense of peace settling over him. The feeling of seeing you there safe and sound, next to him, was something he couldn't quite explain. Jungkook had never been one to shy away from his responsibilities, but now, with you in his life, everything felt different. He wasn't just working for himself anymore. He was working so he could return to you, to the warmth of your presence. The connection between the two of you had only grown stronger over the past 3 months, and it was clear that something deeper was forming, something that neither of you could fully explain, but something that you both felt. You lay there, cocooned in the soft warmth of the blanket, yet the comfort felt incomplete. It was strange, this emptiness in your chest. It wasn't that you couldn't sleep, it was that the silence, the absence of Jungkook beside you, was unsettling. The bed felt too big without him, the space beside you too cold. You had never been this dependent on someone before, but in the 3 short months of your marriage, his presence had become your quiet comfort. It was simple, almost ordinary. No intertwining of fingers or late-night whispers, no cuddling, no tight embraces. You both had your own space, lying parallel to each other, just the quiet assurance of his body close by yours, the rhythm of his breath filling the space between you both. That was enough to ease the unease that used to disturb your nights. You tried to relax, closing your eyes and focusing on the rhythm of your breathing, willing yourself to fall asleep. The next morning, your eyes fluttered open, the faint sunlight streaming through the curtains gently pulling you out of sleep. You stretched your arms, your hand instinctively reaching out across the bed, searching for the familiar warmth, but all you felt was the cool emptiness of untouched sheets. A sinking feeling settled in your chest as your thoughts raced. Did he leave already? You sat up slowly, glancing at the clock on the bedside table. It was only a small sigh escaped your lips. It must be his meeting, you thought, running your fingers through your hair. He always works so hard. Jungkook, you whispered to yourself, the longing evident in your tone. You yawned softly, pushing the blanket aside and sliding your feet onto the floor. The chill of the wooden floor against your skin made you shiver slightly as you made your way toward the bathroom to freshen up, your mind still lingering on him. Meanwhile, in the study, Jungkook jolted awake as the sharp tone of his alarm echoed through the room. He groaned softly, his body stiff and sore as he shifted in the chair. His back protested every movement, the hours of sleeping hunched over taking their toll. Jungkook, what the hell? He muttered, glancing around in confusion. His eyes landed on the desk cluttered with papers and his laptop, the faint memory of working late flooding back to him. Did I really sleep here? He shook his head in disbelief, rubbing his neck to ease the tension. The clock on the wall caught his attention. It was already 8:30. He sighed deeply, running a hand through his tousled hair. The meeting flashed through his mind, a reminder of the busy day ahead. But before he could fully dive into the stress of work, another thought crept in, warm and comforting. Maybe she's still asleep, he thought, a small smile tugging at his lips. The image of you curled up in bed, your hair spread across the pillow, flashed in his mind. The thought made his chest tighten in the best way possible. He pushed himself up from the chair, wincing slightly as his muscles protested. Jungkook, I should go see her before I leave, he murmured to himself, his voice low but determined. He straightened his shirt and stretched briefly, his mind already focused on you. The idea of catching a glimpse of your sleepy face before the chaos of his day began was enough to motivate him to move faster. The bathroom door creaked open, and you stepped out, dripping water from your damp hair and skin. You didn't bother to change in the bathroom, knowing no one was around. Your steps were slow and unhurried as you moved toward your room. You didn't feel the need to rush. The house was quiet, empty. You stood there, naked, pulling on your and the lower half of your clothes at the same time. But as you reached for the hook on the back gave way, the clock in the clasp weak. With a soft huff, you paused, standing there for a moment, trying to reattach it, completely unaware that someone was from the door. The soft creak of the door was barely audible, but it was enough to freeze him in his tracks. His body went rigid, his breath catching in his throat as he took in the sight of you. His eyes widened, his mouth slightly parted as he took in the view of you. Standing there, completely unaware of his presence, your back slightly arched as you tried to fix the. His gaze moved closely from your face to your exposed chest. In front, the way the water still clung to your skin, he tried to move, to step back, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. His breath grew shallow, each inhale feeling like a struggle as his body reacted against his will. His hands trembled at his sides, the urge to take you in his arms, to hold you close, just like that, was almost unbearable. His heart pounded, and for a moment, his mind blanked. But when you moved slightly, reaching for your again, the reality of what was happening hit him like a wave. He blinked rapidly, backing off a few steps, his mind scrambling to make sense of what he had just seen. His chest tightened as he finally tore his gaze away from you. Jungkook, what am I doing? He muttered under his breath, the words coming out low and tortured, as if to reassure himself that he just hadn't crossed a line. His hands clenched into fists, his nails digging into his palms as he tried to fight. The sight of you, so vulnerable, so unaware, was almost too much. His body was responding without his. It's undeniable. He couldn't help but glance. His betrayed him. He was, and it made everything worse. Jungkook let out a long, strained breath. He couldn't stay here. Not now. He needed to leave before he did something he'd regret. Swearing softly under his breath, he grabbed his things from the study, trying to calm himself. The thought of seeing you again before he left for work was supposed to bring peace. But that sight, it had set something dangerous in motion, and he knew he had to get out of there before he lost control. He quickly turned his back and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. Jungkook stood frozen outside the door, his heart racing in his chest. Every image of you, and unaware, flashed in his mind. It was as if you were etched into his vision. Your damp, the way the water clung to your, the you adjusted your. Every time he tried to focus on something else, his thoughts snapped back to that moment, replaying over and over in his head. He couldn't escape it. His mind spiraled with thoughts of what could have happened if he hadn't backed away, if he'd stayed longer. The mere thought of touching you, feeling your skin beneath his fingertips, sent a jolt of heat coursing through him. He had never been with anyone like this before, never felt this kind of pull. It was unfamiliar, dangerous even. His body ached with the desire to hold you close, to feel your warmth against him, to kiss you until there was no space left between you. But as the hours passed in the office, the thoughts wouldn't stop. The tension between his mind and body was unbearable. He tried to distract himself with work, but all he could do was imagine what it would be like to be with you. Every second of longing only made the desire grow stronger. You were in the kitchen, your back to him as you placed dishes on the table. He stood still for a moment, just watching you, taking in the sight, the way you moved. You turned and spotted him in the doorway, and your face lit up with a smile, your eyes sparkling with excitement. "Yin, you're home early," you said, your voice sweet and light, filled with a happiness that made his chest tighten. You had just finished preparing dinner. It felt like you were waiting for him, and the realization struck him hard. You were excited to see him. Jungkook's heart swelled. He never expected to feel this way. The fact that you were excited about his presence, that you cared enough to make dinner just for the two of you, made him feel important, wanted. It was something he wasn't used to, and it stirred something deep inside him. But the sudden flood of emotion left him speechless. All he could do was smile weakly, a soft, almost embarrassed grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. He couldn't bring himself to say anything more. You tilted your head slightly, your curiosity piqued. "Yin, how did the meeting go?" you asked as you sat down at the table, waiting for him to join you. He forced himself to take a step forward, finally sitting down, but being near you made him nervous. "Jungkook, it went great," he managed to say, his voice low, a little too tight. You nodded, but you noticed the shift in his demeanor as he sat down. There was a tension about him, something off. You felt a pang of concern, but you didn't say anything right away. You began serving some food onto his plate, your movements graceful and calm, but your eyes caught his for a split second. You couldn't help but notice the way his gaze briefly flicked from your face. It was quick, almost unnoticeable. You noticed the way his breath caught as his eyes lingered there for just a moment too long. You were still focused on the task at hand. That's why you didn't pay much attention, but still asked, "Yin, is everything okay?" Jungkook snapped out of his daze, blinking rapidly. "Jungkook, huh? Oh yeah, yes, everything's fine," he said quickly, his voice rough. As you placed the plate in front of Jungkook, your warm smile lit up the room. "Here, Jungkook, thanks." His hand reached for the spoon, but his movements were stiff, as if his body wasn't entirely under his control. He tried to focus on the food, tried to ground himself in the simplicity of the meal you had so lovingly prepared, but his mind and body had a different plan. The sight of you, even in such an ordinary moment, was pulling him apart inside. Every move you made, how your hair fell to one side as you leaned forward to reach for a dish, had his pulse racing. His gaze betrayed him. His respect for you was unwavering. He adored you, admired you, and would never do anything to make you uncomfortable. But right now, the boundaries of his self-control were blurring. He clenched his jaw, gripping the spoon tightly in his hand, silently cursing himself. "What the hell is wrong with me? As the minutes stretched on, his gaze betrayed him multiple times, lingering far longer than it should have. Whenever you moved or adjusted yourself, he couldn't help but notice the way you shifted in your seat, how the faint outline of your teased him, no matter how much he scolded himself. You, on the other hand, weren't unaware. You caught his lingering stares more than once. At first, you were confused, but as it happened again and again, the realization hit you. Your cheeks flushed as you processed it. He was staring. You weren't sure how to feel about it. You weren't uncomfortable. Not at all. If anything, the way his gaze seemed to burn with something unspoken sent a shiver down your spine. It was new, unexpected, but strangely thrilling. Deciding to test your theory, a mischievous smirk tugged at the corner of your lips. You leaned back slightly in your chair, stretching your arms above your head in a slow, deliberate motion. Yin, I'm so full. Now, you murmured, faking a yawn, and stretched. As you tilted your head back, you watched him carefully from the corner of your eye. The effect was immediate. Jungkook froze, his spoon halting mid-air as his eyes locked onto you. His gaze traveled over you, lingering far longer than before, and you could see the faint flush creeping up his neck, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. Your eyes widened slightly when you realized just how intensely he was staring. For a moment, you felt shy, your heart thundering in your chest. But his reaction sent a wave of warmth through you, a strange mix of nerves and satisfaction. Quickly, you shifted back to your normal position, picking up your spoon and pretending to focus on your food. But the way your hands trembled betrayed you. You stole a quick glance at him, and your stomach flipped when you saw the embarrassment written all over his face. His head was tilted down now, his lips pressed together tightly, but you could still see the redness in his cheeks. Jungkook, meanwhile, was falling apart. She noticed. His chest felt tight, and his palms were damp with sweat. He had been caught, and the realization made him want to sink into the floor. Yet, even in his embarrassment, he couldn't stop thinking about how beautiful you looked, how you seemed to light up the entire room with just your presence. The clatter of dishes being rinsed filled the heavy silence of the kitchen. Jungkook stood at the sink, his back tense, shoulders slightly hunched as he scrubbed a plate. You stepped up beside him with the rest of the dishes, your heart fluttering as you placed them on the counter. You could feel the awkward tension hanging between you like an invisible wall. He wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence, but his throat felt tight, and the words refused to form. You cleared your throat softly. "I'll dry," you offered, your voice light but nervous. He nodded without looking at you, handing you a plate. The brief touch of his fingers against yours sent a jolt through him, and he quickly withdrew his hand. After the dishes were done, Jungkook was the first to leave the kitchen. His steps hurried as if he couldn't get away fast enough. You slowly followed him into the bedroom. When you entered, Jungkook turned to look at you briefly, his eyes scanning your face as though searching for any sign of discomfort or anger. "Jungkook, let's sleep," he said quickly. You nodded, watching as he moved to his side of the bed with slow movements. He climbed in and immediately shifted to the edge. You stood there for a moment, hesitating. The way he was acting, so distant, so tense, it only made you more certain that he was struggling. He wouldn't meet your eyes, wouldn't say much. Finally, you climbed into bed beside him, pulling the blanket up to your waist. Jungkook stayed still, his body taut like a coiled spring. His eyes remained fixed on the ceiling, his hands gripping the blanket tightly, as you both tried to drift into sleep. The night was still, the soft sound of your breaths the only noise in the dimly lit room. Jungkook lay stiffly on his side, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts running wild. He had tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, your image resurfaced, your smile, your soft voice, and the way you had looked at dinner. With a frustrated sigh, he turned to face you, unable to fight the pull anymore. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he felt his heart stutter. You lay on your side, your face looked so serene, your lips slightly parted as you breathed evenly in your sleep. Jungkook swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. His eyes roamed over your delicate features, taking in every detail as if memorizing you. His heart, which had been pounding earlier, seemed to soften as he stared. But then, his gaze shifted, almost instinctively. His eyes trailed down the curve of, to the delicate rise and fall of your beneath the thin fabric of your shirt. His breath hitched. He clenched his jaw, trying to control the sudden wave of coursed through him. The sight was innocent, yet maddening, pulling him into a whirlpool of thoughts he knew he shouldn't be having. Jungkook swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. His mind screamed at him to look away, but his instincts took over. He couldn't help but imagine how warm it would feel. A new, forbidden thought crept in. What if he could you close his face there and lose himself in the comfort of you? His hand twitched, and before he could stop himself, it moved toward you. Gently, his fingers brushed against your waist. The contact sent a jolt through him, and he froze. His thumb traced gentle circles on your side, his touch feather-light. His breaths came shallow and uneven as he fought against the growing urge to pull you closer. But then, you stirred. Jungkook's entire body tensed as your fingers twitched, and your body shifted toward him. His breath caught when, in your sleep, you wrapped your arms around his waist and buried your face against his chest. He wanted to cherish this moment, to stay like this forever, but guilt and panic clawed at him. This isn't right, he thought. But as much as he told himself to pull away, he couldn't. Your grip around his waist tightened, holding him in place. He felt his breath falter as your chest moved against his with each soft inhale and exhale. A low in his and his cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and panic set in when he realized what was happening. But then he felt your fingers twitch against his back, and he froze again. Were you waking up? The faint sound of a rapid, uneven rhythm stirred you from your sleep. Your eyelids fluttered open, and it took a moment for your vision to adjust in the dim light. You felt warmth surrounding you and quickly realized you were lying against Jungkook's chest. Your brow furrowed as you listened closely. The sound you had heard was his heartbeat, pounding hard and fast against your ear, which woke you up. You blinked in confusion, wondering if something was wrong. Slowly, you pulled away from him, careful not to disturb him too much. But as you shifted, Jungkook's body stiffened immediately. His breathing hitched, and you caught a glimpse of his wide, startled eyes. Yin, Jungkook, are you okay? You asked softly, your voice tinged with concern. His eyes darted down to you, and for a brief, horrifying moment, he wondered if you had noticed. That panic surged through him as he backed away from you immediately. Jungkook, why yeah, I'm fine, he stammered, his voice unsteady, his movements jerky. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I must have been half asleep. I didn't realize I moved closer. His explanation came out in a rush, the words tumbling over each other. He avoided your gaze entirely, turning his back to you as he adjusted his position on the bed. His shoulders were tense, and he seemed to be holding his breath. You sat up slowly, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. There was something off about his behavior, something he wasn't saying. His stiff posture and the way he was fidgeting with the blanket only made you more suspicious. You smirked slightly, the boldness in your chest growing as you decided to take control. You slid closer to Jungkook, the mattress dipping slightly under your movement. Slowly, your hand slipped under his shirt, the warmth of his skin heating your fingertips. You traced gentle, lazy patterns on his toned abs, feeling the way his body stiffened under your touch. His breath was unsteady, and his voice came out as a shaky whisper. Jungkook, why Yin, what are you doing? You leaned closer, your lips grazing the shell of his ear as you whispered teasingly. Yin, say it. He gulped audibly, his hands twitching at his sides as if debating whether to hold you or push you away. Jungkook, say what? He stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. You smiled mischievously, pressing your nose against the side of his. The faint scent of his cologne mixed with his natural scent made your head. You whispered again, this time slower and more deliberate. Yin, I saw it. Jungkook, his body froze completely, his wide eyes snapping open as his breathing hitched. Slowly, he turned to face you, his gaze filled with both panic and curiosity. You felt his hands rest lightly on your waist, as if he wasn't sure if he was allowed to hold you. Jungkook, he hesitated, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. I don't know what's happening to me, but I'm sorry, he muttered, his voice low and shaky. Yin, for what? You asked softly, tilting your head. You wanted to give him the space to speak but couldn't deny the nervous excitement building in your chest. Jungkook, I saw you yesterday, he admitted, his voice barely audible. His cheeks flushed deep red as he averted his gaze, his fingers trembling slightly against your waist. Your eyes widened as his words sank in. The memory of his strange behavior over dinner and the way he avoided your gaze made sense now. Yin, you what? You said, your voice filled with a mix of surprise and curiosity. Jungkook, I'm sorry, he blurted, his words tumbling over each other in his rush to explain. It wasn't intentional, I swear. I was just coming back in the room, man. And I don't know how, but now I can't stop thinking about it. I feel so embarrassed, so guilty, and I didn't know how to tell you. I thought you'd be angry, and Before he could spiral further into his nervous rambling, you silenced him by cupping his cheeks and pressing your lips against his. His words died instantly as his eyes widened in shock, but the warmth of your lips quickly melted his hesitation. Slowly, he closed his eyes and leaned into the kiss, his hands moving to hold you securely by your waist. The kiss deepened, your lips moving in sync with his. It wasn't rushed or desperate, it was tender. You tilted your head slightly, deepening the connection even further, and to find a better angle, your breaths mingling. When you finally pulled back, both of you were panting softly, your foreheads rested together as you gazed into his wide, uncertain eyes. Yin, hey, you whispered, your thumb brushing over his cheek. It's okay, I'm your wife. Jungkook, you don't need to feel guilty or embarrassed about this. He blinked rapidly, his lips parting as if to respond, but no words came out. You could see the emotions swirling in his dark eyes, relief, nervousness, and something deeper, something unspoken. Jungkook, you mean, you're not mad? He asked hesitantly, his voice small but hopeful. You smiled softly, shaking your head. Yin, mad, no, surprised? Yes, you admitted with a light laugh. But you don't have to hold back or feel ashamed. Jungkook, we're married. Remember this? It's natural. His tense shoulders finally relaxed, and a small, shy smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Jungkook, I didn't know how to say it without sounding like a creep, he admitted sheepishly, his gaze dropping for a moment. You chuckled, leaning closer to plant a soft kiss on his cheek. Yin, you're not a creep. Jungkook, you're my husband. Jungkook's gaze softened even more, if that was possible. His eyes locked onto yours, dark and full of gentleness, as if he was searching for reassurance, a silent plea for permission. Jungkook, can I ask you for something? His voice was barely above a whisper. You tilted your head slightly, your smile gentle but sincere. Yin, go ahead. His fingers toyed with your hair as he spoke. Jungkook, I want to hug you, he murmured, the words almost too shy to leave his lips. You felt a soft chuckle bubble up from your chest, the sweetness in his request overwhelming. There was something almost innocent about the way he asked, and it made your heart ache with affection. You leaned in, your arms reaching around him instinctively, pulling him into an embrace. His body melted into yours, and he sank against you like he was relieved to finally be able to feel you close, his arms wrapping around you tightly. Yin, is that even a thing to ask? Jungkook, you teased softly, your words laced with affection, your breath warm against his neck as you pressed closer. He chuckled, the sound light and almost nervous. Jungkook, maybe, he said with a sheepish grin, but then his voice lowered, his words hesitant, as though he wasn't sure how you would react. But, can it be? The simple request took you by surprise, and your breath hitched, your body stiffened involuntarily, your heart skipping a beat as the weight of his words settled over you. You pulled back slightly, your eyes wide with disbelief, your pulse racing. You hadn't expected that. Jungkook's face immediately shifted into a mask of nervousness, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of your sleeve, almost as if he regretted saying anything. Jungkook, you said I'm your husband, and this is natural, he stammered, his voice full of uncertainty, a slight tremble there. So, please, may I? You swallowed hard, the words hanging on the tip of your tongue. You looked at him, his eyes wide and hopeful, and despite your own hesitation, you took a slow breath before your lips parted to speak, your voice barely above a whisper. Yin, okay. Jungkook's face lit up instantly, like a child granted a wish, his nervousness vanishing in an instant. The tension that had gripped him slipped away as he smiled widely, and in one fluid motion, he lifted his hand over his head, revealing the toned, defined muscles of his chest. You couldn't help but admire the beauty of his body, the way every inch seemed to tell a story of strength and gentleness. His gaze remained on you, soft yet steady, as he waited patiently. You hesitated, your fingers clutching the hem of your shirt, suddenly feeling a wave of self-consciousness. Your heart raced as you fidgeted nervously, unable to meet his eyes. Jungkook noticed immediately. He leaned in closer, his hands reaching up to cup your cheeks gently, his touch warm and grounding. Hey, he murmured softly, his thumb brushing against your skin in slow, soothing circles. Jungkook, it's okay. We don't have to rush. His words, so calm and comforting, made you exhale a shaky breath. He kissed you again, a soft, unhurried press of his lips against yours. The kiss was gentle at first, almost hesitant, but with each passing moment, it deepened, the tenderness in his touch easing your worries. His lips brushed against yours repeatedly, each kiss deeper than before and full of affection. The more he kissed you, the more you relaxed into him, your hands instinctively moving to rest against his chest. "Jungkook, I love you," he whispered against your lips, sending a shiver down your spine. Your heart fluttered, the words you had wanted to say finally finding their way out. "Yin, I love you too," you whispered back, your breath catching in your throat. Jungkook chuckled softly, a sound that vibrated in your chest, before pressing a lingering kiss to your forehead. His lips stayed there for a moment. His hands slowly moved to his fingers brushing lightly over yours as he waited for your signal. "Jungkook, may I?" he asked again, his voice low and comforting, the question laced with excitement. His lips still rested against your forehead, his breath warm against you. You swallowed hard, your heart pounding in your chest as you gave him a hesitant nod, unable to find the words, but trusting him completely. His smile widened at your approval, and slowly, carefully, he began to the fabric of your his movements deliberate and unhurried. His eyes never left yours, and in them, you saw nothing but patience and respect, a silent promise that he would go at your pace, that he would never rush you. The connection between you deepened as he continued, his hands guiding the fabric higher, until your shirt was lifted over your head, leaving you exposed in front of him. But it didn't feel wrong, it felt natural, like you were exactly where you were meant to be. Jungkook's gaze lingered on you as he noticed your shy demeanor, your cheeks flushed a deep pink, and your fingers fidgeting against the blanket. His lips curved into a small, playful smile, his tone soft yet teasing as he spoke. "Jungkook, isn't it uncomfortable wearing a sleep?" he murmured, his voice laced concern. He tilted his head slightly, his eyes twinkling with warmth. "Jungkook, don't wear one from tomorrow, you'll sleep better." The casual intimacy of his words made your heart race, and you bit your bottom lip nervously. A soft nod was all you could manage as your gaze dropped. Unable to meet his eyes, you felt both shy and oddly comforted by his gentle teasing. He extended his hand toward you, his fingers slightly curling in an invitation. His gaze met yours, silently asking for permission, and after a brief pause, you nervously raised your hand and leaned forward, trusting him completely. His fingers brushed yours briefly as he reached you. His movements were deliberate and unhurried, his touch feather-light as he unwrapped the final piece of fabric. The soft filled the quiet room, and you felt loosen before the material down your shoulders, falling silently onto the your cheeks burned as you instinctively crossed your arms over, but the weight of shyness became overwhelming. Without thinking, you leaned forward, wrapping your arms around him tightly, burying your face in the crook of his neck. The sudden embrace took Jungkook by surprise, and for a brief moment, he stilled. Then, a soft, affectionate chuckle escaped his lips, and his arms wrapped around you in return. His large hands spread across your back, holding you close as his chin rested lightly atop your head. "Jungkook, you're so cute," he murmured, as he held you. Jungkook let out a quiet, satisfied sigh, his eyes closing as he soaked in the moment. Your body against his felt so real, so warm, that for a second, he wondered if this was a dream. The way you fit perfectly in his arms felt unreal. He didn't mind at all. It didn't matter if you weren't ready to him. Just holding you like this was more than enough for him, a moment he deeply cherished. "Jungkook, let's sleep now," Jungkook said, his voice soothing and tender. You nodded against his chest, too shy to lift your head. Jungkook adjusted your positions carefully, guiding you both to lie down on the bed. He kept you close, his arms never leaving your frame as he found a comfortable position for the two of you. You clung to him instinctively, your body curling against his. His fingers began to trace light, soothing patterns on your back, his touch so gentle it sent tiny tingles across your skin. The rhythmic motion of his hand, across your back and hair, combined with the warmth of his embrace, lulled you into a state of utter relaxation. Your breaths grew slower, softer, as sleep began to pull you under. Jungkook felt the subtle change, the way your body grew heavier against his, and his lips curved into a soft smile. Carefully, he pulled the blanket higher, tucking it around both of you until you were completely cocooned. He leaned down, pressing a lingering kiss to your temple, his lips warm and gentle. "Jungkook, good night, my love," he whispered, his voice filled with affection and admiration. You were already fast asleep, your breathing soft and steady against his chest. Jungkook let himself relax, his eyes closing as he held you close. The quiet serenity of the moment enveloped him, and with a deep sigh of satisfaction, he drifted off to sleep, a peaceful smile still lingering on his lips.